Here's to family, and to truth, because the truth has a way of setting the right people free. I raised my glass, smiling at my wife Victoria as the crowd of elegantly dressed guests at our country club fell silent. Her parents, Charles and Helen Morrison, nodded approvingly from their table. They probably thought I was about to deliver another one of my grateful speeches about their perfect daughter and the miracle child they'd convinced me to raise as my own. 2 years of calculated patience had led to this moment. 2 years of swallowing humiliation, recording conversations, and building a case while playing the part of the devoted, clueless husband. You know, I continued casually, reaching for the remote control in my pocket. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I clicked the button. The large projection screen behind me flickered to life. But I think the truth is worth so much more. What happened next would destroy 5 lives in exactly 7 minutes and 13 seconds. Quick, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether you've ever discovered a family secret that changed everything. Now, if you've ever been the outsider in someone else's family drama, smash that subscribe button because this story is about a man who turned the tables on everyone who underestimated him. Hit that like button if you think people who mock others behind their backs deserve to be exposed. Let's dive into this methodical takedown. My name is Daniel Richardson, and I'm a financial analyst from Boston with a modest upbringing and simple dreams. I believed in honesty, hard work, and love, especially love. I'd spent my entire adult life building a foundation for those dreams, brick by careful brick. I met Victoria Morrison at a charity fundraiser where I was volunteering with the accounting team. She was breathtaking tall, with auburn hair that caught the light and eyes that seemed to see right through you. She was from Old Money, a family name attached to buildings downtown. I was the son of a postal worker who'd put himself through college on scholarships and student loans. When she gave me her number that night, I couldn't believe my luck. When she agreed to marry me 2 years later, I thought I'd won the lottery of life. Victoria would stroke my face as we lay in bed, her voice soft and intimate. You ground me. In a world of fakery and pretense, you're the only real thing I have. I cherished those words. I cherished her. I worked late nights to provide the lifestyle she was accustomed to. When her family looked down their noses at me during holiday dinners, I smiled through it. When they made snide comments about my modest achievements, I nodded politely. Love makes fools of us all, but some fools get a rude awakening. For 3 years, we tried to have a child. Doctor's visits, fertility treatments, special diets, we did it all. I held Victoria through countless nights of tears, assuring her that we would find a way, that our love was enough. Then came my diagnosis. The specialist was kind but direct. My condition meant I couldn't father children, ever. I remember sitting in the car afterwards, staring at the clinic's entrance, trying to find the words to tell Victoria that I couldn't give her the one thing she wanted most. I waited weeks, researching adoption options, anything to soften the blow. Then one evening, she burst through our front door. Beaming, Victoria waved a test in the air, her voice filled with joy. I'm pregnant. I stood there frozen. The impossible had happened, or so I thought. I spoke carefully, dreading her reaction. Victoria, there's something I need to tell you. I've been to a specialist. I can't have children. It's a medical condition I was born with. The change in her face was instantaneous. Her eyes narrowed. Her smile hardened. Victoria's voice turned sharp and accusatory. So now you're calling me unfaithful? Grow up, Daniel. Maybe you're just too stressed to function properly. Ever think of that? She stormed off, slamming our bedroom door. Later that night, she came to me with tears and apologies, blaming hormones and the shock of my words. Victoria whispered against my chest, her voice trembling. It must be a miracle. Don't you believe in miracles, Daniel? I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But miracles don't smirk when they think you're not looking. The dinner at her parents' mansion should have been a celebration. Victoria was 5 months pregnant, glowing in an expensive maternity dress. I was playing my part, the proud, slightly bewildered father-to-be. Then Charles clinked his crystal glass with a silver spoon. Charles announced with obvious amusement, his gaze sliding over to me. A toast to Daniel, who clearly doesn't know as much about biology as he thinks. Nervous laughter rippled around the table. He continued, swirling his wine with deliberate cruelty. Not all men have fertility issues and raise someone else's kid. "You're a rare breed, son." Helen touched her perfectly styled hair and smiled thinly. "She chose you out of kindness, really. You should be grateful she still stands by you." Even Victoria's younger brother, Michael, chimed in with obvious glee. "At least now there's one capable man in the house." I felt the blood drain from my face as everyone laughed. Everyone except Victoria's cousin Sarah, who looked at her plate in discomfort. Victoria herself gave me a quick glance before joining in the laughter, her hand resting on her belly. I smiled politely and raised my glass. "To family," I said, the word bitter on my tongue. That night, as Victoria slept soundly beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the dinner in my mind. They all knew. They were all laughing at me, the devoted husband raising another man's child while the wife and her entire family mocked him behind his back. Something inside me shifted that night. Not with a crack or a bang, but with a quiet slide, like ice breaking off a glacier. Silent but irreversible, I got out of bed and went to my home office. I opened my laptop and ordered my first hidden recording device. Over the next months, I became a different man. On the surface, I remained attentive, excited about the baby, the perfect husband. But beneath that mask, I was carefully documenting every betrayal. The discreet audio recorders I planted around our house caught Victoria on the phone with friends, laughing about how she'd trapped me. Victoria's voice was gleeful as she spoke to her friend Amanda 3 weeks before the birth. "He's completely clueless. Kevin is freaking out a little, but I told him as long as Daniel thinks it's his, we're fine." Kevin, her colleague at the marketing firm, the married father of 3 who had spoken at our wedding about the importance of family values. I hired a private investigator who photographed their lunch meetings at a hotel across town. I recovered deleted messages from our cloud backup. "Kevin, what if he figures it out? Daniel? He's like a loyal dog, grateful for scraps and too trusting to bite." When our daughter Lily was born, I played my part. I cut the cord, I cried appropriate tears. I posted proud father pictures on social media. And the day after we brought her home, while Victoria napped, I carefully collected a DNA sample and sent it to a lab along with my own. The results came back a week later. 0% probability of paternity. I filed the report away with my growing collection of evidence. I was no longer acting on emotion. I was building a case, piece by methodical piece. For 2 years, I documented everything. The affair continued, though less frequently. Her parents' tax issues came to light during a Sunday dinner, when Charles drunkenly boasted about how he'd outsmarted those government idiots again. I recorded Victoria's workplace misconduct. She'd been directing clients to Kevin's consulting firm in exchange for favorable treatment, breaking company policy and possibly the law. All the while, I dotted on Lily. Despite everything, I loved that little girl who smiled when she saw me. She wasn't mine by blood, but for 2 years, she was mine in every way that mattered. That made what I had to do even harder. But sometimes the only way to heal is to remove the infection completely. The breaking point came on my birthday. Victoria had forgotten, of course. I came home to find her on the phone with Kevin, giggling about weekend plans while Lily played at her feet. Victoria's voice was bright with excitement. "I'll tell Daniel I have a conference. He never checks up on me. God, I need this weekend. Playing house with him is exhausting." I stood in the doorway, briefcase in hand, watching my wife plan her deception while my daughter, not my daughter, stacked blocks on our living room floor. In that moment, clarity washed over me. This would never change. The disrespect, the betrayal, the mockery, it would continue as long as I allowed it. I was enabling my own humiliation. That night, I began to plan my endgame. Timing was crucial. I needed maximum impact, with witnesses who mattered to Victoria. Her social standing was everything to her, her reputation at work, her status among friends, her position in her family. These were the pillars of her identity. I would remove them all at once. Lily's second birthday provided the perfect opportunity. Victoria had been planning an extravagant party at the country club for months. Everyone would be there: her parents, her brother, colleagues from her firm, including Kevin, friends from their social circle. I volunteered to handle the audiovisual setup for the celebration, insisting that I wanted to create a special slideshow of Lily's first 2 years. Victoria was delighted by my initiative. Victoria patted my cheek condescendingly, finally showing some backbone. If she only knew. I spent weeks editing my recordings, selecting the most damning clips, the most explicit text messages, the clearest evidence of the affair and the fraud. I prepared documents, the paternity test, financial records showing her parents' tax evasion, and evidence of workplace misconduct, I consulted with lawyers about my rights and options. I filed for divorce quietly, timing the papers to be served immediately after the party. I secured my personal assets and documented everything thoroughly for the proceedings. Most painfully, I began the process of removing myself legally from Lily's life. She wasn't my blood, and Victoria had made it clear through her actions that she'd never truly been mine to raise. The kindest thing I could do was make a clean break before she was old enough to remember me clearly. The night before the party, I sat in Lily's room, watching her sleep, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the way her eyelashes fanned across her skin. I whispered an apology she would never remember and a goodbye she would never understand. Then I stilled myself for what would come next. The country club ballroom was decorated in pink and gold, with floating balloons and a 3-tier cake that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Victoria wore a designer dress and worked the room like the socialite she was, accepting compliments about Lily. Her parents held court near the bar, Charles loudly discussing his latest business acquisition while Helen critiqued the catering staff. Kevin had brought his wife and children, keeping a respectful distance from Victoria while sneaking glances when he thought no one was looking. I moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting pats on the back from men who had mocked me behind my back, air kisses from women who had laughed at Victoria's stories about her simple husband. When it came time for the toasts, Victoria looked surprised when I approached a microphone. I wasn't known for public speaking, especially at her events. I announced with steady confidence, "I'd like to say a few words." The room quieted. Victoria gave me an uncertain smile. "2 years ago, my life changed forever," I began. "They say becoming a father transforms you. They don't tell you how much." Approving nods from the parents in the crowd. "I've learned a lot in these 2 years. About family, about loyalty." I paused. "About truth." I lifted my champagne glass. "To family and to truth, because the truth has a way of setting the right people free." With one click of the remote in my pocket, the large screen behind me came to life. I didn't turn to watch. I didn't need to. I'd memorized every clip, every word, every gasp that would follow. First came Victoria in our bedroom, laughing with Amanda about me. "He's completely clueless. Kevin is freaking out a little, but I told him as long as Daniel thinks it's his, we're fine." The room fell silent. Then her parents at that fateful dinner. "Not all men have fertility issues and raise someone else's kid. You're a rare breed, son." Text messages between Victoria and Kevin appeared on screen, showing their affair, their mockery of his wife, and their mockery of me. Then came the workplace misconduct emails showing how they diverted clients and manipulated accounts, breaking company policy for their personal benefit. Charles and Helen's tax issues were next, their own words condemning them as they boasted about hiding assets and lying to the government. Finally, the paternity test results filled the screen. 0% probability of paternity. Through it all, I stood calmly at the microphone, watching the faces in the crowd. Shock, horror, embarrassment, rage. Kevin's wife stood up abruptly, gathering her children and storming out. Helen collapsed into a chair, her hand over her mouth. Charles turned red with rage, lunging toward me only to be restrained by Michael and Victoria. My beautiful, treacherous Victoria stood frozen in the center of the room as her carefully constructed world imploded around her. As the final slide faded, I raised my glass once more. "Here's to every lie you fed me, and to every truth I saved for today." I set down my untouched champagne and walked calmly to the exit, ignoring Victoria's screams behind me, the chaos of raised voices and shocked exclamations in the parking lot. I removed my wedding ring and dropped it into a storm drain. Then I drove away without looking back. The fallout was swift and absolute. Bym the next morning, Victoria had been fired. Her company's ethics committee didn't need much deliberation after seeing evidence of her relationship with Kevin and their client manipulation schemes. Kevin was also terminated, his corner office emptied by security while he pleaded for his job. His wife filed for divorce by noon, citing the video evidence and requesting full custody of their children. His reputation in the business community, built over 15 years, evaporated overnight. Charles and Helen Morrison received a visit from the IRS by the end of the week. The anonymous tip I'd sent, complete with dates, amounts, and methods of their tax evasion, had caught the agency's attention. Their assets were frozen pending investigation. As for the social fallout, it was more devastating than any financial Penalty. The Morrisons were blacklisted from the very clubs and circles they'd once dominated. Invitations dried up, calls went unreturned. The whispers and pointing began whenever they appeared in public. Victoria found herself suddenly alone. Her friends, the same ones who had laughed at her stories about me, now avoided her calls. The women who had envied her lifestyle now gossiped about her downfall with barely concealed delight. She tried to reach me, of course. Hundreds of calls, texts, and emails ranging from rage to pleading to threats. I never responded to a single one. The divorce proceeded exactly as my lawyer had predicted. With the evidence I'd gathered, Victoria had no leverage. I kept the house, the majority of her assets, and left her with the debts she'd accumulated. Behind my back. As for Lily, I made the hardest decision of my life. I petitioned the court to have my name removed from her birth certificate and all parental rights terminated. I couldn't raise Kevin's child knowing what I knew, and I couldn't punish an innocent little girl for her mother's sins by remaining a cold, resentful presence in her life. The court eventually determined that neither Victoria nor Kevin was a fit parent after evidence of neglect and emotional manipulation came to light. Lily was placed with Kevin's sister, a kind woman who had always wanted children but couldn't have them. I set up an anonymous trust fund for Lily's education, my final act as the father I had tried to be. 6 months after Lily's birthday party, I sold the house and moved to a quiet suburb outside Seattle. I started my own financial consulting firm, focusing on helping small businesses. I bought a modest house with a garden and got a dog a rescue. Ironically enough, I heard through mutual connections that Victoria had moved back in with her parents, now significantly poorer and socially ostracized. Kevin had lost his family, his job, and his reputation, eventually relocating to another state to escape the scandal. The Morrisons, once so proud and imperious, had been forced to sell their mansion to cover legal fees and back taxes. They now lived in a small condo, avoiding the social events they once dominated. As for me, I began to heal. Slowly, carefully, I rebuilt my life on my own terms. I dated occasionally but took my time. Trust doesn't come easily after it's been so thoroughly shattered. 3 years after Lily's birthday party, I received a letter from Kevin's sister. It contained a picture of Lily, now 5 years old, smiling broadly at her kindergarten graduation. On the back was a simple note. She's happy. Thank you for the trust fund. She'll know someday that someone loved her enough to make the hardest choice. I keep that picture in my desk drawer, not on display. That wouldn't be fair to either of us, but close enough that I can look at it when I need to remind myself that sometimes the most painful decisions are the right ones. People in my new community know parts of my story, not everything. I'm not one to parade my wounds, but enough that they understand why I value honesty above all else. They respect me not just for surviving betrayal, but for the calculated precision with which I handled it. There's a certain peace in knowing that I took control of my narrative, that I didn't allow myself to remain a punchline in someone else's joke. Victoria and her family had crafted an elaborate deception, thinking themselves clever and me a fool, but in the end, it was my quiet patience that proved most devastating. Not a heated confrontation, not a messy emotional scene, just a systematic, methodical unveiling of truth. Sometimes at night, I sit on my porch with my dog beside me, looking at the stars, and I think about how differently things might have gone if Victoria had simply been honest. If her family had shown me basic respect. If Kevin had honored his own marriage vows. But then I remind myself that I'm better off now. Free from lies, free from mockery, free from the exhaustion of loving someone who saw me as nothing more than a convenient prop in her life's performance. The greatest revenge wasn't the public humiliation or the financial ruin I left in my wake. It was the simple fact that I reclaimed my dignity, my self-respect, and my future, all things they never believed I had the strength to do. In the end, I didn't just survive their betrayal, I transcended it, and that is a victory they can never take away from me. So we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected? Or did the birthday party revelation hit you harder than you thought? I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Daniel's response was justified, or did he go too far? Drop your opinions in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. If this methodical exposure kept you hooked, smash that like button. And if you're new here, hit subscribe for more stories where patience and planning lead to perfect justice. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.